A new investigation shows a number of popular Jamaican beach resorts covered up sexual assaults, then paid victims to keep silent. According to the Detroit Free Press, sexual assaults of tourists are a long-standing and unchecked problem in Jamaica, where an estimated 1 American is raped a month, according to State Department statistics. The paper also says victims agreed to payoffs by resorts to protect the resorts' reputations and revenue. Tresa Baldas is the federal courts reporter with the Detroit Free Press. She worked on this investigation and joins us now. Tresa, thanks for being with us. Help us understand how widespread this issue is. Is it a few resort chains refusing to report the assaults, or is the problem more widespread?
You know, that's a question I can't answer 100%, but what I do know is that I interviewed and spoke with victims from multiple resorts. This wasn't just one resort. It happened at several resorts, and every resort handled it differently. You had some that would have the guests sign non-disclosure agreements, and they would refund their trips. You had other victims tell me that the resorts just ignored me and said, you know, try and forget about it, just deal with it. And you had others that said they talked me out of going to the police, and they can't, you know, just go home and forget about it. So how widespread it is, I'm not sure, but State Department statistics going back 7 years shows us that an estimated 1 American a month is reports being raped in Jamaica at the resorts. And there have been year after year warnings from the State Department alerting tourists about this. And I think that's the tricky part. A lot of people I spoke to said I had no idea about these travel alerts.
Well, what happens to the alleged attackers when assaults are reported to the resorts?
Again, it varies person by person. I've had some that, you know, when they reported it, initially there's sort of, and it's not fair. Every situation is different, but overall, the victims are told, you know, calm down, you know, we'll talk about this, we'll deal with this. Some have called the police, but there's a resistance to do that. The resorts sort of want to handle this on their own. And, you know, sometimes they're not believed, or sometimes they tell them, well, you know, we've never heard of this happening before. That's what triggered this entire investigation. We had 2 women from Detroit who were in Jamaica in October, and they were raped at gunpoint inside the resort, an all-inclusive resort. And when they went to the front desk, they were told, we've never heard of this. When they went to the police said, we've never heard of this. I interviewed tourism officials, oh, this never happens here. And that's sort of what triggered the whole investigation was, you know, does it happen here more than they're saying? And it looks like it does.
Well, the stories victims told you as part of this investigation were often violent and graphic. What kinds of issues are these victims still dealing with years later?
You know, it's again, it varies victim by victim, but there was one girl, she was 17 years old. She lost her virginity to a man, she says, raped her in a locked laundry room. And her friend who was with her was 21 years old. She said she was gang raped by 3 resort lifeguards. These young women still struggle with it. Their mothers were with them. They blame themselves. There's still a lot of, you know, crying over it. And, you know, are we at fault here? Victim blaming, victim shaming. Another woman I interviewed, she had been molested as a child. So when this happened to her on vacation, it sort of brought it all back for her. You know, the severity is different victim by victim, but it's hard to deal with.
Hard to deal with, but so important. Thank you so much, Tresa Baldas, for sharing your reporting and insight with us.
Thank you for having me.